welcome to it's episode 9 of Friending the Mirror. I am author and professional speaker Don Shaw, and I'm very happy to have with me today as a guest musician Kit Karlson, formerly with Stephen Kellogg and the Sixers. Currently, Kit is doing a lot of music producing for other bands, including bands that he used to work with. And let's see, hopefully, is the music still going? Because it's not supposed to be.
A tiny little bit, yeah. It's a good song, though.
Yeah, let me go ahead and just stop it again. Is it stopped now?
It is stopped now.
Gotta love technology, like you
it's
say.
It's still going a little bit.
Really? Huh. I wonder why that would be. Because I'm pretty sure that it's paused. Anyway, like I said, gotta love technology. Well, anyway, the reason that I wanted to start with that song is totally experimental. I've never started a show with a song before. And the reason is because that is Kit on the keyboard playing with Stephen Kellogg and the Sixers. I'm also pleased to say that Kit, the song that I play at the end of every episode, it's a song called Nothing More by the Alternate Roots. If Kit actually played on some of the versions of that song, and he mixed versions of that song. So I have connection through Kit through bands that I know. In fact, I met Kit in Massachusetts when my husband and I traveled to see a band called Carbon Leaf, one of my favorite bands. And Kit happened to be sitting in at that show. Ian and I got in early because we volunteered to do merchandise for Carbon Leaf. And I had an opportunity to talk to Kit. Not very long. I knew from having followed some of the doings of Stephen Kellogg and the Sixers that Kit had an episode of Bells Palsy while he was on a tour. So I kind of used it as a conversation starter. Now here, several years later, when I started doing this webinar, I asked Kit if he would be willing to come on the show with me and talk about what it was like for him to have Bell's palsy. So I'm going to introduce Kit Karlson, and I'm really, really happy to have you here to tell your story, Kit.
Well, thank you for having me, Dawn. It's a pleasure to be a part of this show. It feels like a very wonderful thing that you're doing, and just providing some, just providing like, I don't know, what's the best way to say it? Just, inspiration for people when they have difficult times and all of that. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Great. So Kit, I'm going to leave you on camera for a sec because it's going to be a short question, but could you talk about what it was like for you when you discovered that you had Bell's palsy?
Yeah, I can. So it was maybe February, March of 2010, and I was playing in Stephen Kellogg and the Sixers as I am, and we were about to go on tour with a band called Need to Breathe, and we were going to go on a 3-week tour. And I woke up the day before the tour, and something just felt weird. My face felt a little numb on one side, so I went into the bathroom and I looked, and it was as though half of my face was drooping down. It wasn't as though that it was that half of my face was drooping down, and I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe I had a stroke or something. I mean, at that point, I've never experienced it. I'd never heard of. I didn't know what Bell's palsy was at the time. I didn't even know that I had that. So I woke up. I was a little freaked out. I went to the doctor immediately, and he looked at it right away, and he said, "Well, there's a couple of things that it could be." As it is when you go to the doctor's office, everything is terrifying. So I went into the doctor's office, and he's like, well, it could either facial paralysis can come from Lyme disease or herpes or HIV. And if we don't know what it is, then we call it Bell's palsy. So it was stressful. So here I am sitting there thinking that I might have either Lyme disease, HIV, or herpes, or any combination of them, or none of them. And so they did a bunch of tests, and they found out that it was Bell's palsy, and which basically just means that you have facial paralysis, and it can last for, it usually lasts for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, and but sometimes it lasts for a lifetime. Sometimes there are residual effects that you have for the rest of your life. So a bit terrifying. I was at first, because I wasn't even around anybody except my friends. So I didn't feel self-conscious at that point, really, because I'm around my very close friends and my roommates that I lived with. What gets sort of complicated is that we were about to go out on a 3-week tour for one of the bigger tours we had ever been on at that point, because Need to Breathe is a really great band, and they were doing very well, and we were definitely going to play for thousands of people a night. So, what was I going to do? Not play the tour? But if you looked at me, my face was definitely a little bit, it was like drooping on one side. And then at the same time, I smile a lot on stage. And when I smiled, you would really notice my face a lot. If I'm talking too much, you can just let me know. But so I
No,
smile a
and
lot.
I certainly understand about the smile.
Yeah, when you
I
smile
mean,
a lot, it's
yeah.
very noticeable what's happening. So anyway, so I just decided to go out on the tour because I couldn't cancel the tour. Our band is a very interactive band, and everybody was really important to the show. So one of us being missing wasn't really an option. So so I went out on the tour, and as I got to the first show with Need to Breathe, obviously everybody in my band was great about it, and they were super supportive and said, whatever you need, I'll give to you. When I met Need to Breathe, it turns out that their mom, the Need to Breathe, is the lead singer and the guitar player are brothers in the band, and their mom had Bell's palsy. And so we chatted a little bit about that, and which kind of gets to like an overarching theme of, until you have something you never really, until you've experienced something that you don't know about, you don't know anything about it, and you generally don't know people who've had it. But sometimes when you get something like that, it sort of opens the floodgates of finding out other people who've had it. And I found so many people who had Bell's palsy that I never knew about, people I knew who never even talked about it, which is comforting. It's very comforting to know that, because I was sort of sitting there wondering if my face would ever get back to normal, and did anybody else experience this? And so it was terrifying, but it was definitely made a lot easier when I found out that other people had it, and people were very good to me about it. So we went on the tour, and it's funny, it was a 3-week tour, and my Bell's palsy actually lasted till right about the last few days of it. And it was, I was like, oh, perfect. The one, I got this thing that lasted exactly the time that I was out on tour. Fortunately for me, it went away completely, and that was great. So that's sort of how I got it and how I discovered it, and then I'm sure there'll be more questions about what it was like on tour,
Yeah, so basically, how was it? I mean, I remember reading, I don't know if it was an email blast that we got or if it was some kind of announcement on Facebook, but it was basically, be nice to Kit, he has this Bell's palsy issue type of thing, so please be patient and all that. And I can't remember. I mean, that was years ago. I don't remember what it said,
that's
but I
probably
was
what it
just
said.
wondering. Yeah. So, I mean, I know that did you guys come out and interact with the fans normally after the show?
So we normally do that a lot. I did skip that part of it. But the biggest thing that I noticed is when we would be on stage. And again, we're on stage in front of like thousands of people a night. It was a very good tour. And again, I smile a lot, which is, I feel like, the thing that really indicates what's going on, and that I look a little bit off. And, there were a lot of new fans because we hadn't played with Need to Breathe yet. So we were in front of a lot of new people. So probably our old fans must have known that something was different, but then other fans of Need to Breathe who'd never experienced our show before probably just thought this was what I looked like. And it was very strange. I mean, I also I play tuba in the band. And
Oh,
I couldn't, unfortunately, I couldn't play tuba because half of my mouth didn't work. So, the biggest thing that I remember was I remember looking out in the audience, and you could always tell people were staring at you, staring at me, because it seemed like something was off. And it did, all the stereotypicals, like I felt like a freak. I was really freaked out. Like I was very freaked out when I got it. And then I kind of came to terms with it, but then playing in front of people just sort of illuminated the fact that I had it. And then it's sort of like when you get sick, when you're healthy, everything's fine. The minute you get sick, you just realize all the things you can or you can't do. And it definitely affects you emotionally. So yeah, so I would notice people every night staring at me. Stephen would notice people every night staring at me. And then eventually he brought it up and he was like, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on, which was really great for me because it made it really obvious what was happening. And then at the same time, it was nice too, because I feel like people then not only like were okay with it, they sort of got really behind me in it. You know, they were very supportive, and I did chat with some fans in and out of the venue, and I met a lot of people who had experienced it, who had friends who experienced it, and really helped me make it through that. You know, it was funny, by the end of the tour, it turned into like this somewhat of a cool thing. We're like, he's got Bells Palsy and he's still playing this show. But at the end, it's funny because it was going away and you couldn't even really notice it. So Stephen was like, I'm really happy that the Bells Palsy went away. But it was a really good thing to talk about from stage. So, you know, so, but again,
So
everybody.
let me ask you though, how you mentioned that, I mean, it was different. Now, with me, for example, it's obvious, really different. Half my
Yeah.
face doesn't work. So was it as severe as what I have, or was it maybe, did you still have some movement?
It was very similar to what was happening with your face. Totally. Like it was the same experience. And now I will say, you know, the first maybe like 2 weeks of it for sure were like that all the time. Then it did sort of gradually get better the last week, but there was a solid 2 weeks where like it felt like that. Like it didn't work at all. And if you looked at me, it just looked, my face was crooked and didn't make much sense at all. Yeah. So it was pretty, I imagine it was as severe as it could have been for that, you know?
Well, and I'm guessing, I mean, I certainly understand that I cannot play a wind instrument. I mean, I couldn't drink out of a straw. I think if I really, you know, seal my lips around, I might be able to blow some notes in a penny whistle.
Mhm.
But no, I certainly understand the tuba, the trombone, the clarinet, all that kind of stuff. That's totally out. So I definitely get that. Let's see. I was going to ask you, I'm glad that, yeah, I mean, okay. A lot of people ask me, you know, do I have Bell's palsy? Or they assume that I have Bell's palsy.
Mhm.
And I explain, no, I had a tumor that was removed when I was born. And unfortunately, when they removed the tumor, they had to take out bone, muscle, nerve, and all the stuff that kind of makes up the side of your face.
Mhm.
So for me, it's permanent. For me, I am adjusted. I had some speech therapy. I learned how to eat. They actually started me on a cup because I couldn't, you know, suckle out of a nipple. So, how was it for you when you had to eat? I mean, you had to like totally. What about talking? What about eating? I mean, obviously playing the keyboard, I could. Well, except I can't play keyboard, but physically, I am perfectly capable of playing the
Mhm.
keyboard. That certainly would not stop me from playing the keyboard. I totally commend you for going on a tour. That's a lot of people would say brave of you. But tell me, what was it like, your function?
Well, it's interesting that you brave of me. Totally, you know, I think you're very brave. I think people who go out and do stuff are brave. I will say that in retrospect, going out on tour was probably the best thing that could have happened, because I really feel like if I had just been inside of my house, I would have been depressed for weeks on end, and I just wouldn't have. It would have been a very sheltering experience, and you know, if I learned anything, and if I had anything to pass on to people, it's that you really have to you just have to talk to people about stuff. It's the best way to cope with things, you know, because you'll get support from people. You'll get support from people's experiences. So in a way, I felt totally brave going out on tour. But like I said, in retrospect, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. The timing was perfect because it made me get out into the world and just exist and like not, you know, do work and get out there and not totally focus on the fact that something was different, you know, because being on tour is nuts. You just go all day long. So you know, so just for what it's worth, I definitely feel very fortunate that the circumstances happened as they did, because it allowed me to sort of just not get stuck inside my own head and just be down on myself for 3 weeks. That being said, yeah, couldn't eat. I definitely had to eat out of, you know, drink out of straws, and like, you know, I didn't want to eat around people because I'm sure I looked ridiculous and there was food falling out of my mouth. And it's like all those, it's again, like I said, being sick, it's like you take for granted all the things that you can do until the moment you can't do them. And when you can't do them, like you didn't even realize it. It's funny. It's like when the power goes out and you're like, oh my God, my entire life is connected to electricity. You know, the same thing. It's like, you know, the left half of your face is pretty important, you know, if you're used to using it. So whether it's eating or even singing, you know, I'm sure I looked pretty ridiculous singing as well. And definitely a lot of parts of the job and just a lot of parts of life were affected by that. And, you know, you obviously become self-conscious, and it's easy to, yeah, it's just easy to get really depressed. But again, that's was the best thing about being around people is that A, they'll make you feel good because they're your friends, and B, you know, they'll share experiences that they've had, which really gives you comfort. So
Now, do you ever feel like anybody treated you in kind of a condescending way? I mean, on a tour, I imagine you had the opportunity to kind of keep back. You probably were able to, like you say, not eat in front of other people and kind of keep hidden a little bit more. But I mean, when you were exposed to other people or even fans and what, did you ever get the impression that maybe they were a little bit condescending?
I mean, everybody was very nice once they knew it was happening. If anything, it wasn't condescending, it was just confusion. And it's like, I mean, you've experienced this too, right? Where it's like, you know, it's if you go into the airport and like the other day I was in the airport and I saw somebody who must have had like something like half their nose removed or something, you know, like you can't help but look at something that you're not used to seeing. That's like human nature to be interested in that, you know, or to be confused by that. So and nobody was mean, you know. I think people, I don't know, it looked sometimes like people might have been making fun of me off the stage, but I think that was really in, you know, while I was on stage, and they didn't know about it. Again, once they knew about it, I feel like people were good. But it is it's classic human nature. People just get freaked out by things they don't understand and they haven't seen. So I don't feel like anybody was condescending, but there was definitely some confusion, and which was which was really great, where Stephen would bring it up because, you know, I felt more comfortable when people knew what was going on, and not that I was just like some weird freakish person. I don't know. It sounds superficial, but it definitely helped.
No, I mean, obviously, having a good support system like I did when I was growing up really mattered. I mean, of course, there were people that I got teased by, and I mean, I had the disadvantage of having to go through puberty with
Yeah,
being different.
which is hard enough in
So,
and of itself with
yeah,
no
it was
problem.
actually but and so it, basically, yes, the support system that you had was definitely important for the fans. And one of the things I've always advocated is about what people understand. When you take the time to explain something and people understand it and the mystery is gone, all of a sudden it's not an issue. Even little kids, small children, I'll explain what it is. I'll ask them. I said, go ahead, ask me. I don't mind. And then I'll explain it to them. And all of a sudden, I'm boring to them after that because they know and I'm no longer interesting.
Yeah,
But
no,
you're
it's
right.
true.
It is human nature to be curious. And I
Definitely,
know
yeah.
that, yeah, a lot of people are put off a little. People I have connections in the facial difference community, and I know that some of them, and sometimes it's timing, but it is a little off-putting to have people stare at you. It can make you feel self-conscious, and it's interesting. I mean, I probably don't notice it as much anymore because I just kind of block it out. It's not as important to me anymore. It's just a part of my reality. So it's interesting to me what you said about noticing that people were staring at you. And also the fact that Stephen noticed that people were staring at you, because I have had the same thing with some of the people that I've been places with. Is they're like, oh, well, so that person over there is staring at you. And I'm like, well, what can I really do about it? It's doesn't really bother me. What I don't notice isn't going to bother me.
Yeah, I mean, when you couple human nature with the fact that you know, we are a very looks-based society, like magazines, and especially for women too. It's like there are just so many, uh, there are so many. What's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, there's a lot of
Well,
stereotypes and ways that you should be, and yeah, a lot of pressure to be a certain way and to look a certain way in our society, which is, I mean, it's neither here nor there. That is just the reality of how it is. So when you couple that with your own ego and all of that stuff, like, I mean, it's hard enough to exist in the world with nothing wrong with you, you know? things can be really challenging, and life can throw things at you. But when you have something that sort of changes your physical appearance and you can't do anything about it, it's just it's a difficult thing to deal with, because I think of the pressures that people put on how you look in society. So yeah, it's challenging, and I can totally I mean, if anything, that must be a little bit of what it's like to sort of be a woman in our society. Not to get all feminist on you, but it is interesting how there are so many expectations of you to be a certain way, and when you're not that, it's freaky to people, and it's freaky to yourself too. So
Well, I have to laugh when you say that when there's nothing wrong with you, because I think what happens is there's a lot of people that have really nothing physically that anyone would notice is wrong with them. And I swear, as human beings, we manufacture things. I mean, we can all name things that we don't like about ourselves. So do you feel any differently now about yourself? I know that it's given you perspective, but do you just kind of look in the mirror and say, hey, I'm just so glad that both half of the house of my face work?
yeah, yeah, it's interesting. It's like all things, you think you're never going to forget about the experience of taking things for granted. And, I definitely try not to. I feel pretty okay with who I am as a person. I felt pretty okay with who I was as a person. So fortunately for me, I got back to that state. So, now I just try to be really open when I see people who have things going on that I don't understand or I'm not used to, because I remember that experience. And so if anything, it's just opened my mind to be more open-minded about, that experience, or talking to people, or finding out what's going on with people. As myself personally, I feel pretty comfortable in my own skin. But again, I was fortunate in a situation that I started with, so for better or for worse. But yeah. So yeah, I don't have any residual effects like that, but I do try to remember that everybody's going through something. I forget who said it, but there's a quote that's, every pair of eyes has seen something you could not possibly understand. Like everybody's gone through something that you couldn't possibly understand. So it's just important to remember that and not judge people when you don't need to judge people. So
Yeah, I mean, even I try to do that. I mean, of course, even though I look different, I notice when other people are different. It's human nature. And in fact, I almost consider it an advantage because I do look different. I actually feel a little more comfortable walking up to someone who has a difference and being able to ask them or being able to start a conversation, because I mean, it's almost like, well, okay, we know that we have a shared experience. So, and I know that, I mean, that's why I was able to walk up to you at the Iron Horse in Massachusetts and bring it up, because I don't know if many people would do that with you, but for me, it was like, I knew that it was something that we, at least, that you had something that you could identify with me about.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, where everybody, look, society, I often think about this too. What it made me think about a lot was like how if we just didn't have eyes, none of this would matter. So it's like, if you really think about it, like everybody's the same. Everything's going through problems and has issues. And so, yeah, so it's it's good when you have those experiences that allow you to like relate to people on a deeper level, and to relate to different people on a deeper level. So yeah, I mean, I feel again, I don't have any regrets in my life about anything. I really don't, like, because I learned from everything that I did and screwed up and that happened to me. So I wouldn't change it all. And I'm really glad that it happened to me, because I was able to get the experience of just getting a different perspective on looks and how people look and what it's like to feel somewhat even more awkward in society. So
Yeah, and I know one of the problems with me is sometimes I actually get held to a higher expectation about how other people look, partly because of what I do and partly because of how I look. And I
yeah.
mean, every once in a while, I might accidentally step out of bounds, and it's like, oh, whoops. I didn't mean to be hypocritical, but sometimes, I mean, again, it's just all part of being human. It's like we
Yeah.
can't be happy and cheerful all the time either.
Well, that is the truth, and yeah, exactly. Couldn't be, and you wouldn't want to be, because then you wouldn't appreciate all the happy moments. So, hey, we all live, make mistakes. It's just part of things. As long as you just try to be good about things when you do that, that's the best you can do.
So, Kit, I want to give you an opportunity. I know that you've been really, really busy with your recording studio. You're working with Chip, who is a fellow musician, and you're working on a lot of exciting projects. I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell viewers what sort of things you're doing now, because you're not with the Sixers. The Sixers is inactive, and I know you every once in a while you go out and play music, but tell me what you're up to.
I do, yeah. So the Chip you're referring to is Chip Johnson, who played in the Alternate Roots for a very long time, and then also played in Stephen Kellogg and the Sixers. And we both live in the DC area and have a studio and produce music together. We started doing it about a year ago, so last June, and we were really fortunate. We worked with some great people. We worked with Tony Luca and Pat McGee and this band, The Neils, this wonderful folk rock duo from Massachusetts, and a bunch of other projects. And then currently, Stephen Kellogg and I are still very good friends, and as we all are in the band. And we are producing his new EP with him. And then we're also working on another great artist named Jonathan Williams, he played piano in the Pat McGee band for a very long time, and he's an incredible country artist. And then also a really wonderful singer-songwriter named Brendan James, who's a fellow piano player. And yeah, that's what we have going on right now. But it's really awesome. I fell in love with the studio and making records, and I'm very fortunate to be able to do that with a great partner. And we've been really busy, and I couldn't ask for anything more. So that is what I've been up to.
Well, I seem to have this vague memory from one of our conversations that potentially one of the reasons why you elected to get out of a touring life was because of something like the Bells Palsy coming on, that it can be caused by stress. Am I wrong in my memory of that? Does that have any influence at all on the stress of the touring? Of why
Yeah,
you
touring
get,
touring is touring is it takes a lot of energy. And once I'd done it for a decade, it was the stress is not like stress, like everybody in the band are still my best friends, but the stress is like just not sleeping a lot and always being in different places and just always traveling around. And I definitely, and I enjoy being a creature of habit. So I work a pretty normal schedule, and I wake up and I make coffee, and I prefer that sort of style of life that I have living now. And it is probably way less stressful. There's always stress that's involved, but the touring, I pretty much done anything I could ever want to have done in touring, and then just decided to travel less. And then the studio made a lot of sense. But yeah, definitely getting things like Bell's palsy. I tore my ACL on the road and had to get knee surgery. Like, I went through a few pretty major things on the road, and yeah, I put in my time.
doesn't surprise me. I mean, you guys get pretty physical up there.
That is a
Jump
very
around.
good. That is a very good way to put that. We sure do. Myself particularly.
So, and I was gonna when you were on stage and you had Bell's palsy, did they at least say, all right, well, it's your left side of your face, so why don't we put Kid on the right side of the stage so his right side is out? Did they think about stuff like that, or did you just basically just say, hey, whatever?
Yeah, no, I think I was actually strategically positioned at the correct side of the stage where I normally was. I definitely didn't switch sides, but I think it worked to my benefit. But yeah, again, like you said, like I said before, but those are all the things you think about, stuff you never thought about before. Like, should I be facing this way? Just like, it brings a whole new level of thought to all of the things that you do, for better or for worse. So fortunately, I was located on the correct side of the stage to look the least Bell's palsy-ish to people.
Yeah, I try to actually what mostly influences where I am with a person or in a room is actually the fact that I'm deaf in my left ear, and that actually
Oh, wow.
the strategy of placing myself to where my right ear is in a better position to come in is more important to me than what side of my face shows. Although I confess, I mean, if I were asked to be on camera on TV or whatever, But on the other hand, I'm also coming to grips with this is me. It's kind of like, I was self-conscious about my smile, and now it's like, well, that's my smile.
Yeah, no,
That's
totally.
just the way I look, and my face lights up. So if I want to smile, I'm going to smile.
Yeah. Yeah, better to smile than worry about it for the rest of your, than never smile again. That is for sure. Yeah. But very fortunate. I feel very fortunate that I had the experience because it gave me some perspective, and then very fortunate that it ended too. Because again, a lot of people can have residual effects for the rest of their lives, from Bell's palsy, and I was fortunate to not have had that. So.
Yeah, you're definitely very lucky that way. Okay, so we're about done. I'm going to go ahead and see. I know there's one or two people on. I think most people are going to catch it on the replay, but if that person wants to ask a question, by all means, now's the time to do it. And secondly, Kit, if you had one piece of advice, and I know you've kind of said stuff, but if you could sum it up, if you had one piece of advice for people that are self-conscious about their appearance or have a physical issue or some way to, what advice would you give them in order to help them improve their attitude or how they feel about themselves or their life or whatever?
Yeah, if I had one bit of advice, I would just say that you just have to get out and talk to people. Try to find out people who have the same similar situation and then find out from their experiences. I mean, fortunately, I've never been addicted to drugs, but I've watched enough Breaking Bad to know that, like going to support group meetings or things like that, I get it now. I understand what that's like, because when you have something, like the best thing you can do is just talk to people about it. Because I think the worst thing that you can do is never talk about it at all and just let your mind freak yourself out and go down really dark paths. So like I said, for me, it was great because I went out into the world and had to be out touring, and I met a lot of people who had it and told me about it. And so that's my advice. It's like, even if it feels uncomfortable at first, you really just have to get out into the world and deal with it. I mean, if you've got something that lasts 3 days, you can probably just stay home. But, for something, that's bigger than that, I think it's really important to just not lock yourself in your house or not be by yourself. And it's too easy to freak yourself out uncontrollably, especially with the internet. I mean, I could type into the internet and find that and like make myself believe I'm dying at any moment of the day, and then I have every single thing known to man. So I actually think with social media and all these things where you can like shut yourself off from society, that's probably the worst thing you can do in those situations. So that would be my bit of advice. Just get out in the world and you'll probably run into people who will have had the same experiences and be able to help you out.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that by saying that is one thing, one of the many things that I am grateful for personally, is that my parents took me out. I traveled the country. I've been to a lot of national parks, monuments, Disneyland, Disney World, all these places, and I'm very, very grateful to my parents for putting me out in the world, for not hiding me away. And I
Definitely.
mean, they were protective to a degree, but I got out there, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's so easy for me to get out there. You just have to do it. It's not easy. You do see everybody stare at you. You do notice.
Yeah,
But that is, I mean, it's part of life, and I would rather be out there in the world than hidden away and not experiencing life. So, Kit,
absolutely. Yeah.
do you have any final thoughts before I close the show?
No, I think just, I think that you're doing a wonderful thing. I think bringing awareness to things like this, and to really just like looks in general, and how we are impacted by our looks in society. Any positive spin that you can bring to that, which you are doing, is a wonderful thing. So I'm very fortunate. I feel very fortunate to have been a part of this, and I think what you're doing is a really great thing and a very helpful thing. So
Okay. Thanks so much, Kit. Thanks for coming on. If you want to hang for me while I close the show, you can. If you want to jump off once I click off you because you're on right now, you're certainly welcome to jump off and go back. I know you're busy, but I'm so grateful that you came on and were willing to share your story because I think that's so important that people, like you say, that people talk about it. So that was Kit Karlson, also known as Goose, to the Sitzer fans. And anyway, so my next webinar is in 3 weeks on May 26th at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, with author, coach, and entrepreneur Michael Bloom. Michael happens to also be one of my mentors that helped me get going on these webinars, as well as helping me get going on Facebook parties. So I've got a lot of success from that too. The title of that show is going to be From Bullied to Celebrated. Just remember, everyone, be kind to others, but don't forget to be kind to yourself. Thank you very much, and enjoy what is hopefully going to be spring weather, and also Cinco de Mayo for those of you who care to celebrate that.
We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other, nothing more. We are how we treat each other.